A lot of people have been asking us how they can help, how they can support us during this really horrible time.
These parents are enduring an almost unimaginable grief.
This is my first story.
Their 6-year-old daughter Lulu and 2-year-old son Leo were stabbed to death by the family nanny.
27-year-old Kinjal Patel admits she became angry when she was feeding the baby rice and water and he was spitting it out. It goes on to say that she forced him to the floor, causing him to strike his head. And in court today, she stood expressionless.
I would never be able to buy Anthony another bag of Cheese Doodles.
It was just hard to hear, hard to talk about. So painful, the mother of Anthony Delgado had her brother read the victim's impact statement at the sentencing for the woman who tortured her 17-month-old son to death.
When a mother or a father leave their child in the hands of a babysitter, they are trusting that person completely. They are trusting them to protect and take care of their child until they come back. A child is probably one of the most valuable things anyone could ever entrust to another person. It's safe to say that most of the babysitters out there are good people who truly care about the children they are taking care of. But every now and again, a parent may realize that the person they entrusted with their child is actually a monster. These are the stories of the 3 murderous babysitters who killed kids in jealousy.
A babysitter in New Haven accused of beating to death a small child in her care.
Today, that woman faced a judge in court. News 8's Aaron Logan is live outside the News 8 control room with the disturbing details. Aaron.
Keith and Ann, the details in this court affidavit will make your stomach turn.
27-year-old Kinjal Patel of New Haven, Connecticut, was trusted to take care of a 19-month-old toddler named Athyan Savakumar in January of 2014. She was babysitting the child inside of her own apartment on Middletown Avenue. The little boy's parents, Siva Kumar Mani and Fenmozi Rajardhan, supposedly thought they had no reason to be concerned when they left their child in the care of Kinjal. They seem to have thought she was a responsible and caring young woman who would take good care of their beloved son until they returned to pick him up. They could have never expected the horrific things that would happen to the little boy when they were gone. If they had, surely they would not have left their only child with her.
27-year-old Kinjal Patel admits she became angry when she was feeding the baby rice and water and he was spitting it out. It goes on to say that she forced him to the floor, causing him to strike his head. And in court today, she stood expressionless.
Imagine trusting someone with your beloved baby, only to find out later that the toddler died at their hands. This must have been horrific for the parents who probably felt guilty for ever trusting Kinjal in the first place.
With a translator by her side, 27-year-old Kinjal Patel faced a judge accused of manslaughter and risk of injury. She tells she's been babysitting a 19-month-old boy here in her New Haven home several times a week. But on January 16th, the unthinkable.
Law enforcement were called into the hospital after the toddler had been brought in for treatment. At that point, he was already in very bad shape, and it was very clear that he had been horribly hurt.
After medical staff reported the boy's skull was severely fractured, he was taken there by his father.
The doctors tried to save the child's life, but after 3 days in the hospital, he sadly passed away. Officer David Hartman of New Haven Law Enforcement talked about what happened when investigators arrived at Kinjal's home. It didn't take them long to determine that she was their main suspect.
We rushed to the home, secured it as the possible scene of a crime, and over the course of several days developed a suspect in the babysitter.
In this court affidavit, Patel admits she became angry with the boy. She was feeding him rice and water and he was spitting it out. She says she was forcing him to the floor, causing him to strike his head.
It's hard to imagine how anyone could treat a defenseless little baby the way that Kinjal treated Athyan.
He was crying hysterically and shaking, and when she picked him up, his head went backwards. All of this wasn't admitted until she told police on January 24th she had been lying to them, saying the child fell backwards. That's when she called the child's father, telling him his child was injured.
Kinjal was arrested and charged in connection with the infant's death. She did not speak much English, which her lawyer said could have contributed to her not really understanding how much legal trouble she was actually in.
This is her first time involved with the court system. I don't think she understood the seriousness of the situation she was facing at the time.
We went to the home to try and talk to the downstairs neighbor who tells police she heard a banging noise so loud that night that she thought the ceiling was coming down.
Kinjal's downstairs neighbors said that they heard bangs coming from upstairs, but could have never imagined the sound was Kinjal pushing the baby against the hard floor.
It goes on to say she heard, quote, approximately 4 to 5 bangs on her ceiling, then she heard a baby crying. She also heard the babysitter yelling in another language shortly after the boy's parents arrived.
While at this point, Kinjal was the only person facing legal problems in connection to the baby's death, law enforcement said they might change in the future as more information came out about Kinjal, this baby, and his family.
I can't say that the investigation is closed. We've certainly closed this portion with this suspect, but you know, anything's possible in the future.
Patel is being held on $1 million bond and is back in court on February 11th.
Sure enough, following Kinjal's arrest, there was a shocking turn of events that likely nobody saw coming. The parents were also arrested in connection with the case. As it turns out, this was not the first time that the baby had been hurt under Kinjal's care. Just a month before his death, Athyan was brought to the same hospital with injuries that seemed to suggest that he had been mistreated.
A new twist in the death of a baby boy who police say was killed by his babysitter.
The child's parents are now facing charges, and state officials say this was not the first time that the baby was hurt while in the babysitter's care.
Sivakumar Mani and Thenmozi Rajardhan were warned by law enforcement not to trust Kinjal with babysitting their son ever again. But for some reason, they ignored the warning, and the child ended up dead.
24-year-old Thenmozi Rajendran stares blankly in the courtroom. Her husband, a mechanical engineer, 33-year-old Sivakumar Mani, looks down when it's his turn to face the judge. Their 19-month-old son died less than 2 weeks ago.
Defense attorney Charles Tiernan says that he believes that these heartbroken parents have already suffered enough having lost their infant son, but that there was nothing he could do to keep them from having to go through this painful legal process.
I think anybody who loses a child, in my view, they've been punished enough. And to have to go through this process is just overkill, but it's the process.
It wasn't just that these parents allowed Kinjal to babysit their son after being told not to. They also lied to law enforcement about who the child had been with when he got injured.
Both are charged with risk of injury and interfering with police. Police say the two signed an agreement with the Department of Child and Family Services, which stated they would not hire 27-year-old Kinjal Patel after the baby was hurt in her care.
Not only did these parents have to mourn the terrible loss of their son, but they would also have to face legal consequences for their own actions.
It's a horrible tragedy, and I think the parents are just looking for an opportunity to mourn the loss of their son. They really haven't had an opportunity to do that.
The parents were given a plea deal that if they chose to accept, they could possibly avoid jail time.
Court documents say the parents lied to police about how the baby was hurt and avoided calling 911. Their attorney says they moved here from India and are planning the funeral for their only child.
Even though Athyan was just a little baby, he was able to save 4 other children through the donation of his organs.
Liver, heart, and 2 kidneys were donated to 4 children. So if you could ever say something good comes of this, this is about it.
The judge ordered a $25,000 bond for both the mother and father. The court is holding their passports. Their next court date is February 18th.
Sivakumar Mani and Thenmozi Rajendran were eventually granted accelerated rehabilitation. This meant they wouldn't have to go to jail, but they would have to successfully complete rehabilitation and stay out of trouble. If they did, their records would be cleared after a period of 2 years. Kinjal, however, would not be so lucky when it came to her future.
An update now on that babysitter in New Haven charged in the death of a 19-month-old boy. She has been found guilty of first-degree manslaughter. In January of last year, say a 19-month-old boy came in with a broken skull and the child died 3 days later.
Kinjal, who had already been in prison for 2 years prior to her sentencing, was given 14 years behind bars.
Patel pleaded guilty under the Alford Doctrine and is set to serve 14 years behind bars, according to the New Haven Register.
Is this punishment true justice for a child who did not even get to live 1 year of his life, much less 14 years? Let us know what you think in the comments.
A lot of people have been asking us how they can help, how they can support us during this really horrible time.
These parents are enduring an almost unimaginable grief.
This is my first story.
Their 6-year-old daughter Lulu and 2-year-old son Leo were stabbed to death by the family nanny.
This case is so horrific that it could easily make any parent never want to trust another person with their child ever again. The Krim family were a tight-knit family that had recently moved from San Francisco to New York. Kevin Krim, the father, worked as a digital content producer for CNBC. His wife, Marina, was a former kindergarten teacher who stopped working so that she could stay home and care for her 3 young children. Marina absolutely loved being a mother and documented her children's everyday lives through her online blog. Yoselin Ortega was the family's part-time nanny. She was 50 years old and had been living in the United States for about 10 years since moving here from the Dominican Republic. October 25th, 2012 started just like any other typical day for the Krim family. Kevin was at work and Marina was going to take her middle child, 3-year-old Nessie, to swim practice. Yoselin came to the home to watch Lulu and Leo. When Marina left her beloved children in the nanny's care, she could never have imagined that this would be the last time she would ever see them alive again. Yoselin, supposedly in a fit of rage, brutally took the lives of little Lulu and Leo.
Now the nanny is on trial and is pleading not guilty by reason of insanity.
This trial will be very hard for us and for a lot of you.
Prosecutors say the nanny felt, quote, resentment and rage at the amount of work she was being asked to do and that her anger reached boiling point.
Imagine coming home to this sort of nightmare. When Marina got back to her apartment, she found it dark and quiet. With 2 little kids around, silence is not the kind of thing you would expect to come home to. Marina couldn't find anyone. At this point, she already suspected that something could be wrong, because the plan had been for Yoselin to come with the children to Nessie's swim practice, but she never showed up. Marina went back down to the lobby and she spoke to the bellman. He told her that he had just seen Yoselin go up to the apartment with the children a short time ago. This didn't make sense. If Yoselin and the children had been in the apartment, why couldn't Marina have seen them? She decided to go up to the apartment again, and this time she took a closer look. What she discovered was every mother's worst nightmare.
When the mother returned home, she discovered the bodies of her 2 children in the bathtub. This photo shows Mrs. Krim on the day of the slayings in 2012. Her face, a mask of grief.
Both Lulu and Leo were dead. They had multiple jab wounds, and the bathtub that they were laying in was filled with gore. In court, Marina would later graphically describe this horrific scene.
I see Lulu. I knew that she was dead. She's lying in the bathtub and her eyes are open. I see Leo next to her. They had blood on them. Then I see the defendant, blood all over her and eyes bugging out. All I remember saying to her is, I hate you.
Yoselin was sitting on the floor next to the tub. When she saw Marina begin screaming in agony after seeing her children, Yoselin attempted to take her own life. She grabbed a kitchen knife and used it to seriously wound herself in the throat.
These are the undisputed facts in this case. The defendant intentionally murdered Lulu and Leo Krim on October 25th, 2012. That she knew what she was doing when she killed them, and that she knew that killing them was wrong.
Paramedics were called and Yoselin was able to survive her self-inflicted injuries. Lulu and Leo were declared dead at the scene. It only took 1 stretcher to carry out both of their little bodies from the apartment. After the bodies were examined, it was determined that Lulu had defense wounds because she had tried to fight off Yoselin. Leo had been asleep at the time he had been attacked. The Krim family lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan and were loved among the community. News of what happened to Lulu and Leo spread quickly and brought shock and pain to the neighbors. They brought bouquets of flowers and left them at the base of the apartment in memory of the 2 little lives who were taken far too soon.
It's a tragedy and I feel so terrible for this family. Horrible, horrible tragedy.
Yoselin was determined to be mentally competent enough to stand trial, and she was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Her defense team was confident that it would come out through the trial that she had been too mentally ill at the time of the murders to be held accountable for them. They even said that she had been hearing voices at the time, something that they claim she had been experiencing for years.
The evidence will show that she has a corroborated history of hearing voices and dissociating from reality since the age of 16.
Yoselin showed no remorse as she sat in court and listened to the graphic details of the case, including Mariana's account of what she saw when she looked inside the bathtub.
Today, the nanny, 55-year-old Yoselin Ortega, stared straight ahead as the prosecutor described the awful moment Mrs. Krim found her slain children.
Marina Krim opened the bathroom door and saw the bloodied, lifeless bodies of her 6-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son stacked in the bathtub, their eyes open, covered in blood, staring ahead.
One of the most disturbing parts of this case is that Yoselin stuck around after the murders because she wanted to watch Mariana's anguish when she realized her children were dead. What kind of evil sicko would enjoy watching something like that?
The prosecutor said the nanny waited to see the mom's reaction at finding her children's bodies.
This case was so disturbing that even the jury had a hard time listening to the details and watching Marina's evident pain.
We saw jurors in tears as they left the courtroom after hearing Marina Krim's heartbreaking testimony. The defendant, Yoselin Ortega, remained emotionless throughout the entire hearing. The trial is expected to last at least 3 months.
One question that you can't help but wonder in this case is why? Why would Yoselin do this to 2 innocent little children? Throughout the trial, it was determined that she was under a lot of financial stress as she was trying to raise enough money to move her son from the Dominican Republic to the United States. Because of her money problems, she had gone to the Krim family and asked for extra hours. She even agreed to help out with housework. But when the Krim family agreed and gave her more hours, Yoselin became angry and resentful. She wanted to be paid more money and complained about how much was expected of her. She also resented Marina because she was able to provide for her children and be the kind of mother that Yoselin knew she would never be able to be. It was because of this building resentment that she eventually snapped and harmed the kids. As was determined throughout the trial, the Krim family had actually always treated Yoselin with kindness and generosity. They paid her $18 an hour for her services and sometimes gave her extra money so that she could visit her family in the Dominican Republic. Sometimes they even traveled there with her. On top of that, those who knew Yoselin and the Krim family said that Yoselin was quite close with the children and really cared about them. But her anger towards their parents was still enough for her to end up taking their lives. Throughout the trial, Marina Krim couldn't help but show her emotion and scream out at Yoselin. All the while, Yoselin didn't so much as flinch in response.
When Marina Krim took the stand, she was visibly shaken and crying uncontrollably. And at times, she looked directly at the defendant, screaming, "You're disgusting, you're a liar." The grieving mother also described in horrific detail what she discovered on that dark day, saying it was like a horror movie.
At one point, the already very tense courtroom was interrupted by this bizarre distraction.
And there was this moment of drama as court officers ran out of the courtroom. It turned out to be an unconnected case in the same courthouse.
Even though this was supposed to be a lengthy trial, possibly lasting as long as 4 months, it ended up taking less than 2. Yoselin's legal team did not succeed in trying to convince a jury that she was not guilty due to reason of insanity. On April 18th, 2018, they made their decision and convicted her. On May 14th, 2018, Yoselin learned her sentence. She would never be a free woman ever again.
A case that was described as every parent's nightmare. 56-year-old New York nanny Yoselin Ortega, convicted of fatally stabbing 2 young children in her care, was sentenced on Monday to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Finally, it would be time for the Krim family to begin the process of truly mourning their loss and start to heal.
A jury found Ortega guilty in April of murdering 2-year-old Leo Krim and 6-year-old Lulu Krim back in October of 2012.
But before all was said and done, both parents took to the stand to say some final words on behalf of their children. Marina said though Yoselin may have killed Lulu and Leo, there is nothing that she could ever do to erase the light that they brought to the world and the joy they spread to those around them.
Marina and her husband Kevin, who was a CNBC executive at the time of their children's death, both gave emotional statements on Monday.
The defendant may think she destroyed Lulu and Leo, but she is a failure in this too. Lulu and Leo are powerful forces. They are two stars now that will always lead us forward.
Kevin spoke about the future that had been stolen from him, a future where he got to see what kind of people Lulu and Leo turned out to be, and what they decided to do with their lives.
We are so sad that we won't get to see them grow up. I had simple fantasies of proudly cheering Lulu and Leo on as they became these great people.
He had harsh words for Yoselin, who he did not forgive for the horrific things she did to his young children.
The defendant knows nothing of responsibility or remorse. She should also know nothing of hope. The defendant is an evil and utterly dangerous narcissist and a complete failure. It is right that she should live and rot and die in a concrete and metal cage, like the ugly, dark shadow of Lulu and Leo's bright, shining lights.
He also made sure to point out that Yoselin Ortega may have become a well-known name because of this case, but it would not be long until everyone forgot about her entirely.
And more importantly, it is right that she will go from being hated by the world to being forgotten by the world before she's even dead. While Lulu and Leo's siblings and legions of family and friends, even friends who never knew them, will never forget their inspiring legacies.
Throughout the whole trial, Yoselin always stayed quiet and emotionless. At her sentencing, she finally took her last opportunity to speak. For the first time, she seemed to show some emotion, wiping away tears as she spoke with the help of a translator. While she apologized for what she did, it also seemed as if she was still trying to play the victim.
Ortega spoke for the first time since the trial began.
I'm very sorry for everything that happened. But I hope that no one goes through what I have gone through. I ask for a great deal of forgiveness. To God, to Marina, to Kevin.
Marina says that this tragedy will not break their family, but that they will continue to move forward.
Patiently and with great determination, we rebuilt our lives. My family and I, we create and build.
Kevin and Marina ended up continuing to grow their family.
Kevin and Marina Krim have had 2 sons since the horrible fall day in October of 2012, when the woman they hired to care for their children killed 2 of them with a kitchen knife inside their Upper West Side home.
In memory of Lulu and Leo, they started a nonprofit charity for underprivileged children. They also helped to establish a special law that makes it illegal to lie about your qualifications when applying for a caregiving position, something they said Yoselin had done. They hope that through these things, Lulu and Leo will be able to help other children in the future.
And now to a murder trial today. A toddler tortured and sexually abused on Staten Island today. His babysitter was sentenced to more than 2 decades in prison for the crime.
Gloria Fields is a real-life monster and the real definition of evil. In 2016, she brutally hurt and killed a defenseless little boy who had been left in her care. The child's name was Anthony Delgado, and the final days of his short life were filled with nothing but pain and anguish. Over the course of the 3 days that Gloria was watching Anthony, she was high on several different illegal drugs. She mercilessly mistreated and hurt the boy while he was still strapped into his stroller. She was later charged, arrested, and convicted of Anthony's murder.
This morning, Gloria Fields entered a plea agreement with prosecutors in order to avoid every grisly and vile detail of what was done to Anthony Delgado being detailed in open court. And even though she admitted to everything done to this little boy, the judge still had to force her to go into the courtroom and face the family.
Gloria was far too much of a coward to face Anthony's loved ones, but the judge told her that she didn't have an option to refuse. The child's mother was in so much emotional distress that she could not read the victim impact statement she had written.
I would never be able to buy Anthony another bag of Cheese Doodles.
It was just hard to hear, hard to talk about. So painful, the mother of Anthony Delgado had her brother read the victim's impact statement at the sentencing for the woman who her 17-month-old son.
The graphic details of what Gloria did to poor Anthony's little body was so vile that his uncle couldn't even bear to read them out loud.
I do not understand in what world it might be acceptable to ever allow an individual who not only... I'm just gonna end that there. I can't read that part.
It takes someone who truly has no conscience or humanity in their heart to do things this unspeakable to a baby.
The thoughts are haunting what this sweet little boy endured back in 2016. Over a 3-day period, his head was on the floor. He was shaken, even sexually assaulted. 32-year-old Gloria Fields pled guilty to first-degree murder Tuesday morning, but refused to enter the courtroom if she was going to be filmed.
When a reporter asked Gloria's defense attorney why she didn't want to come and face the family, he said she felt that she had already fulfilled what had been asked of her by the judge.
She didn't want to come out today. What was that about?
She thought that she complied with the judge's order. The judge said that she had to cooperate with probation, that she had to not get arrested and show up, and she believed show up meant in the courthouse.
Emmanuel Castro, the little boy's uncle, called Gloria out for her cowardly actions.
To me, that was being like a coward. You wouldn't face the people who you've affected.
The family applauded as Supreme Court Judge Wayne Ozzie imposed the sentence.
Even the judge who presided over the case had heard countless stories of the horrific crimes in the past, and he said he had never heard anything quite this evil and disgusting.
But before he did, he said, "This is the most disturbing case I've ever presided over. I was watching you as Mr. Delgado gave his statement. You showed no emotion. It just confirms my belief that you're just depraved in some way."
Anthony's family members were relieved that justice had finally been served for the little boy who was not able to defend himself. Gloria is now locked away where she deserves to stay for as long as the court allows.
Justice was served. Anthony got justice, and that's all that matters to us.
Now, Fields opted not to address the family at all during her sentencing today. Again, she was sentenced to 23 years to life. Judge Ozzie noting that she's only eligible for parole after 23 years, so she could serve a much longer sentence.
What punishment do you think is fair for someone who hurts a little baby? Let us know in the comments. If there's one thing that these horrible stories all show, it's that if you're going to trust someone with one of your children, you have to be able to trust them without a shadow of a doubt. Just because someone may seem like a good, responsible person doesn't mean that they really are. They could be a monster in disguise, just as the twisted women in this story were. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.